Chapter 15. Into the Plaque Palace. The Plaque Palace was a terrifying sight. For one thing, it was huge. Unlike the palace of the Toothfairy King, however, the enormous tooth was the other way up. No tall gleaming roots stretched up into the sky, forming towers. The cracked and rotten roots were half buried in the ground. The rest of the tooth was yellow and black, crumbling and decaying. No moat surrounded the palace, just rows and rows of craggy, decaying teeth. Reece William shuddered. This was the most unpleasant place he had ever been to in his life. The little pair exchanged nervous glances and began to walk towards the looming palace. Now that they were actually here, Reece William did not feel quite so brave. He wanted his stolen tooth back, but he was really rather frightened. As they got closer to the Plaque Palace, they looked for places to hide and stay out of sight. The ground was ragged. There were virtually no trees. The ground was muddy, and here and there were odd clumps of blackened grass. Broken black teeth were everywhere. The little pair got closer and closer still. The gate to the palace was rotten and wobbled on its hinges. Outside the gate, several creatures were moving about. The creatures were small and black. They had leathery wings, long pointed ears, and bandy legs. The most frightening thing was their faces. Big round eyes, a small, pudgy snout, and wide mouths filled with sharp, pointy teeth. Between the pointed ears was perched a rotten tooth helmet. Each of the frightening creatures held a long, sharp spear. The little friends crouched down low behind a pile of rotten teeth. "What are they?" whispered Reece William. "Those are tooth bats," Milktooth replied, and he shuddered. "I've never seen one before, but I've heard they're very mean and nasty." "We need to get into the palace," Reece William said. "How on earth are we going to get past them?" "Don't know," muttered Milktooth. "Those things scare me." The toothbats did indeed look very scary as they scampered about in front of the gate. Reece William thought so very hard that his head hurt. There just had to be a way in. "We'll creep round the side," he said. "Maybe, just maybe, there's a window we could fly through." "Good idea," mumbled Milktooth. "I don't want to go anywhere near those horrible things if I don't have to." And he pointed shakily at the fearsome toothbats. "Right then," said Reece William, "but remember to be very, very quiet. Come on, follow me." Off they went, moving as quietly as mice. Carefully they went round to one side of the palace. They kept as far away from the toothbats as they could. They were very careful not to be seen, but more importantly, not to be heard. Reece William had read somewhere that bats didn't see very well. Instead, they had really, really good hearing. They looked up at the side of the awful palace, and there was a window, not too far above their heads. Or rather, it wasn't really a window, but a rotten black hole. The two friends nodded and fluttered up to the crumbling ledge. Gently they landed, careful not to trip or fall. They crouched down and peered nervously into the gloom. It was a long, dark corridor, and there seemed to be no one there. Reece William and Milktooth glided down into the palace and landed with a soft thump. "What's that?" said a sharp, whiny voice from one end of the corridor. The little pair held their breath and didn't dare to move. Feet pattered along towards them. Although it was very gloomy, they could just make out the shape of a toothbat. It got closer and closer. Making no sound, Reece William took his torch from his rucksack. The creature was almost upon them. It stood right in front of them, peering, listening and sniffing. Just then, Reece William turned the torch on and shone the bright light into the creature's eyes. "Ah!" it screamed. "Me eyes, me eyes! I can't see! It's blinding me! It's blinding me!" the creature wailed. Reece William had also read that bats didn't like bright light very much. The two companions raced past the blinded bat towards the end of the corridor. The creature was bumping about, trying to find them and wailing loudly. At the end of the corridor, they found a door. They pushed it open and shot through. They were in another corridor. This time, there were no toothbats. They ran down the corridor, which ended at a very big door. Carefully, they opened it and peeped round. "This must be the throne room," thought Reece William. The room was very large and round. Like the rest of the palace, it was also very gloomy. At one end there were two large thrones. Between them was a much smaller throne. On the larger thrones sat the Duke of Decay and Duchess Denture. In the middle on the little throne sat baby Rottentot. Just behind the thrones lurked the fat and skinny Gap and Filling. The door suddenly creaked and swung wide open. Reece William and Milktooth tumbled into the throne room. The Duke of Decay jumped to his feet. He was tall and bony, dressed in a long black robe and cape. A tall pointed hat like a wizard's was on his head, and he had a long pointy black beard. When he smiled, his rotten teeth were also black. "Well, well, well, what have we here?" sneered the Duke of Decay. Gap and Filling spotted Milktooth first. "It's him!" they cried. "The fairy we used to get a tooth! The one who got away!" "Really?" said the Duke, folding his arms. "Well, now we have him back. And who is this other?" Gap and Filling stared hard at Reece William. "Hang on a minute," they both said at the same time. "It's him! The boy we took the tooth from! The one who nearly caught us!" "What?" screamed the Duke. "What is he doing here?" Duchess Denture had also got to her feet. She too was tall and bony and dressed head to toe in black. She had a cruel, ugly face. It was made even more horrid by the large set of false teeth in her mouth. In between them, baby Rottentot giggled. It was an awful sound, strangled and gurgling. He opened his mouth to laugh. One rotten tooth hung wobbling madly. Next to it was a perfectly shiny white tooth. "Hey! That's mine!" he shouted. "That's my tooth! I want it